Welcome to Cleantech Forward, a Foresight podcast where we explore clean tech customers, capital, and Canada's path to net zero. Tune in to learn more about Canada's most exciting clean tech startups, industry success stories, investor insights, and academic initiatives as we accelerate the growth and impact of clean tech together.
Welcome to Cleantech Forward. I'm Jeanette Jackson, CEO of Foresight Canada, and your host today. In Canada, climate change is at the forefront of many people's minds as we struggle through the worst wildfire season on record. On August 18th, British Columbia declared a province-wide state of emergency as multiple communities are facing evacuation orders due to the quickly spreading fires. The situation is the same in other parts of Canada as well, as Yellowknife residents have also been ordered to evacuate due to the threat of fire. The effects of climate change are ramping up, and our efforts to control it need to follow suit. As the world races to combat climate change, Canadian cleantech entrepreneurs are struggling to deploy solutions. Canada is home to a wealth of talented innovators and entrepreneurs that are developing groundbreaking solutions that can mitigate climate change, address environmental challenges, and drive economic growth. Canadian cleantech startups are poised to lead the charge in the transition to net zero if they get the support they need to thrive. However, the journey from ideation to market readiness is long and full of barriers and formidable challenges. From securing funding to navigating regulatory landscapes, bringing a thriving cleantech company to scale is a tremendously difficult undertaking, which is where accelerators like Foresight can help. From humble beginnings, Foresight has expanded our scope and reach across Canada. The recent events in Canada and around the world have only reinforced the importance of the work we do and the need to act with urgency. This year marks our 10th anniversary, and for 10 years, we've been helping Canadian cleantech entrepreneurs develop, deploy, and scale their game-changing solutions. In that 10 years, we've actually supported more than 1,000 cleantech ventures, and this has generated more than $439 million in revenue, created nearly 8,000 jobs, and helped raise more than $1.4 billion in climate capital. We've also engaged in more than 150 strategic international and domestic partnerships to help us reach more ventures, get more clean tech products to market, and establish a collaborative clean tech community across the country. Which brings me to today's first guest, Barnabe Geis. Barnabe is the Senior Director of Market Transformation with Foresight Canada. He works to develop programs and partnerships that remove barriers, leverage policy developments, and grow market opportunities that accelerate the adoption and scale up of clean solutions. He is also the Senior Director of Clean Tech with Social Innovation Canada, where he works to advance the development and adoption of clean technologies through social innovation, education, research, partnerships, and ecosystem development. Well, with the Center for Social Innovation, Barnabe founded and was the Executive Director of Climate Ventures, an organization that fast-tracked the success of early-stage entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders developing and implementing solutions to the climate crisis. In 2022, Climate Ventures merged into a partnership with Foresight, and together we co-created Accelerate from Anywhere, a flagship acceleration initiative serving diverse cleantech entrepreneurs across the country. Barnabe has a decade of experience creating and leading accelerators, and in that 10 years has worked with more than 550 startups. Together, Barnabe and I explore why these programs are indispensable for Canadian cleantech entrepreneurs, the driving forces behind cleantech acceleration in Canada, and what we can do to collectively accelerate cleantech adoption. Here's more from my conversation with Barnabe about how he ended up in sustainability and the state of clean tech adoption in Canada.
A lot of it was honestly a little bit by accident, but if I trace it back, I would probably connect it to two major things. One was a love of nature from a very young age. I've just always loved camping and hiking and doing expeditions solo with people. I actually trained to be an adventure guide in BC. And then after that, I wanted to be a war correspondent. So I spent a bunch of time in the Middle East in conflict zones. And over there, you could, even though this was about 12 years ago, you could already see some of the impacts of climate in these conflicts and water scarcity. So I think those two things kind of primed me to pay attention to nature, both from a place, a sanctuary for me, a refuge, but also the impacts on human communities if nature is out of sync, if ecosystems are out of balance. So I started to work in the impact entrepreneurship space almost by accident. I had this journalism background. I started working at the Center for Social Innovation And comms wasn't really what I had set out to do. So I was always really interested in the entrepreneurship space. I'd actually started a social enterprise in the Middle East a few years prior to that. So I kind of rapidly just moved over into the accelerator space. So I was working more on the social enterprise side, but I was primed to pay attention to climate and the climate crisis when it became talked about more. And that really motivated me to move full time into focusing on climate and clean tech startups.
And so you kicked off those activities by starting the group Climate Ventures within SI Canada. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the foundation of that sort of sub-organization and then how that's evolved into our current partnership between Foresight Canada and SI Canada?
At the time, I was running impact accelerators for impact startups at the Center for Social Innovation, and I was already running climate solutions accelerators in partnership with the province in Ontario, so under Kathleen Wynne. And this opportunity came up with the government because I had worked with them for a couple of years. They were really interested in doing more on the early stage clean tech side. So I was able to secure funding for an incubator space specifically for climate solutions and a clean tech accelerator. And so we started building this amazing climate solutions incubator out of the Center for Social Innovation and launched this clean tech accelerator. Everything was going great, except that I knew there were elections happening, and Doug Ford came to power, canceled cap and trade, and basically a week after he came to power, we had to return all this money that we had raised. But luckily, the space had been built, and the Clean Tech Accelerator was, several months in. We still had to wrap it up. At least we got a couple of months runway before we had to completely close it. So we had thankfully diversified our funding at that time. We were running different programs, and a lot of them were actually national. And we had been collaborating with Foresight. And the partnership had been going really well, and I was really impressed by all the work that Foresight was doing. And so I guess it was kind of one of those questions that entrepreneurs ask themselves, whether it's better to build, buy, compete, or partner. And in this situation, it really felt like partnering more deeply made a lot of sense and more clarity in the ecosystem. So we did this merger of Climate Ventures, which basically spun out of the Center for Social Innovation into this partnership with Foresight Canada and Social Innovation Canada. And this partnership's worked really well. Foresight obviously is a leader in clean tech and clean tech acceleration and adoption. Social Innovation Canada is really looking at social innovation more broadly. So how do we address the root causes of environmental and social challenges? And together we've run Accelerate from Anywhere, Earth Tech, Quebec Investor Challenge, and more. So the partnership's been going really good and excited to do more together.
When you think about an accelerator, what do you think its purpose is and the impact that it can have in supporting, in this case, Canadian clean tech ventures?
So accelerators are programs that are really designed just to get a company further than they could go on its own in a shorter amount of time. They really vary in length, and sometimes they're 2 weeks, sometimes they're a year. I've seen 2-year accelerators, but the goal is really always the same. What are the company's objectives, helping them figure those out, and then helping them achieve them faster than they can on their own.
And then with Climate Ventures, was there a particular problem that you were trying to solve?
So with Climate Ventures, we were looking at a couple of things. One was creating a dedicated space for climate and clean tech entrepreneurs. This was built off of the model that the Center for Social Innovation had helped to pioneer. So it was a co-working model, and everyone who worked out of and currently still works out of the Center for Social Innovation has to be working on a social or environmental challenge. So that creates a pretty incredible community. When you have a community of people who gather to work, to connect, to create, to transform, and they're all kind of guided by a desire to make the world a better place, I'd seen firsthand how powerful that was. So Climate Ventures was really, the idea was doing this specifically for climate and clean tech startups. And the other was just really supporting early stage climate and clean tech entrepreneurs, both actually for-profit and nonprofit social entrepreneurs. At the time when we opened, there wasn't a whole lot of programs and accelerators really focused and dedicated on early stage climate and clean tech. So we were really hoping to give them that support early on and help them succeed. Over a few years, we supported 122 early stage climate and clean tech entrepreneurs and helped them earn and raise over $170 million. So the model worked really well. And so it was really, there was a space-based focus, which was really in Toronto. And then there was a provincial and a national focus, which is really about supporting early stage climate entrepreneurs wherever they are in the country and giving them some of the support and guidance that they need to succeed.
Why do you think it's so important we offer these services to Canadian entrepreneurs?
Well, many people listening to this podcast will probably have been entrepreneurs themselves or have worked in startups, and it's a roller coaster. I mean, it's really hard. And a lot, I feel this is changing a little bit, but especially back then, investors didn't really understand the impact side. They kind of treated an impact startup the same way they would a regular startup, which really isn't fair, because when you're trying to run an impact startup, you have all the challenges of a startup, plus you have this impact model. And sometimes it's directly related to your product or service, and sometimes it's actually your product and service is funding the impact if you're a social enterprise. So the journey of an entrepreneur is extremely challenging, and they deliver a ton of value, especially impact entrepreneurs. So here I'm talking about social and environmental. Not only are they contributing hugely to the economy, but they're actually helping to solve these social and environmental challenges. So helping these entrepreneurs succeed, and what success really means, like to me in this case, is if they're going to succeed, it's helping them succeed faster. And if they're going to fail, then it's helping them to fail faster. And running long accelerators, like I've had the privilege of doing most of my career, has been really great, because you often help a company fail and then pivot and then succeed, or at least begin to succeed. And that's really great about having a longer amount of time with them. So in short, accelerators really play a pivotal role in getting that early stage invention and innovation ready for market.
Absolutely. And I think as we look to, over the last 20 years, there's been this sort of pathway to globalization, and now we're seeing kind of a bit of a restructuring of that. We'll call it glocalization, so global thinking, but perhaps more localized service. And I think as markets are changing and evolving, and how innovation is adopted, and how the borders for innovators is changing when it comes to accessing industry partnerships and capital, an accelerator can provide some of that foundational support and information, so that the venture can navigate that and become the best venture it can be. Accelerating Canadian clean tech means more than just delivering an acceleration program, and it can often expand into things like advocating for policy changes, helping grow different market opportunities, and of course, developing partnerships, strategics, or amongst accelerators themselves. How do you see accelerators and other important climate work fitting together?
I love this question, because I think it's really important when looking at accelerating the development and adoption of clean tech to take a holistic approach. And really, it's what attracted me to Foresight at the beginning, is seeing the ecosystem approach that Foresight and the team have taken. But broader than Foresight, you're really looking at when you want to transform an entire system. In this case, we're trying to transform the entire industry, like the economy and the industry. It's the largest transformation in human history. So in order to do something like that, we really have to shift policy, markets, and behaviors. And behaviors can mean culture. So when you look at those kinds of shifts that have to happen across these systems of systems, these interconnected systems, you're really going to need an all hands on deck and all sorts of actors doing this work. And I think sometimes there's a tendency for people in the, I'll call it this larger climate kind of ecosystem, or this larger climate movement, to see each other differently, like entrepreneurs and activists. But to me, we're really all a part of the same fight, all a part of the same movement, and we're just taking different tactics. So I think it's really important, and I've seen Foresight do this very well, to build these partnerships with all kinds of different groups and stakeholders, the think tanks, the advocacy groups, et cetera, that are helping to shift policy, markets, and behaviors. And I certainly have I would say a soft spot for the activists, because I find that they in particular are kind of seen as outside of the clean tech innovation ecosystem. But when you pull back further and you see, okay, you've actually got to shift the policy, the markets, the behaviors, activists are doing a lot, especially really across all three, and especially on policy and behaviors. So I think they're oftentimes in the front lines doing a lot of the really hard work, putting their bodies in harm's way to shift public opinion, to call attention to bad policy, to call attention to bad practices and lack of regulations in markets. And so we don't all get along, of course, and there's disagreement in the right approaches and the right policies, but I think generally we're all trying to build a better world together. And again, as I said, I think it's just important to acknowledge the contributions that all these different actors do, and especially activists that are land and water defenders that are often beaten, arrested, and in many of the parts of the world killed for the important work that they're doing. So all these actors, I think, are really key to solving the climate crisis. And the more that we can build bridges between these different groups, coordinate, have conversation, I think the more successful we'll be.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, accelerators play such a critical role. And sometimes most of us are not for profit. So we're really doing it for this specific mandate or mission, or in our case, the big, hairy, audacious goal of Canada being the first G7 country. But it doesn't come out, without trials and tribulations, whether it's funding or, the competitive landscape, the true opportunity to collaborate. What do you think works well with an accelerator versus, some of the challenges that they may have or face in the innovation ecosystem?
So when I look at accelerators, I kind of think of, for example, if you look at cars, you could say what works well with cars. Well, really the question is which cars are good and which cars are bad. They all have things in that are similar. So in accelerators, a lot of the similar things are they are programs, they take a cohort often approach, they have a set amount of time to provide training, advice, mentorship, connections to investors and customers. But some of them are going to be lemons and some of them are going to be really strong. So I think just looking at accelerators broadly, you really have to dig deeper to see who's involved, what kinds of connections do they have, what kind of track record, what kind of experiences have other entrepreneurs had, especially entrepreneurs that are similar to whatever entrepreneur or company might be considering an accelerator. Definitely in those things, I find that standardized curriculum can work well at the early stages alongside mentorship. So the mentorship is really important. It provides that customized support to the entrepreneurs. But in those earlier stage, you can standardize curriculum, which is important because you want to run these programs efficiently. So you want to have a cohort that has entrepreneurs at a similar stage and a curriculum that's kind of easy to put a lot of entrepreneurs through. And they're all learning how to use a business model canvas and these general concepts that are foundational to what they're going to do. The further they get, the more you really have to pull them out of standardized curriculum and training. And I found few ways to get an entrepreneur more angry than to make them sit through, a 2-hour workshop that they don't feel they need to be at, because they're already so stressed and they're already wearing so many hats that their time is just so precious. So when I design accelerators, especially when it's for later stage entrepreneurs, I'm really thinking about how do I ensure that anything that the team decides we're going to do in this program is responding 100% to the needs of the entrepreneurs. And I find that the best way to do that is to not have a one-size-fits-all approach and to really customize to the individual entrepreneur and startup as much as possible. And that way they're really getting the value that they need when they need it. So really it's across a ramp. You can, the early stages of that ramp, you can have quite a lot of standardization. And the more you go up, the more it's going to be customized. And the more it's going to be responsive really to their objectives, their key results, and helping them achieve those. But it's always going to be, or often going to be, a combination of the training, which is in this case just-in-time training, advice and mentorship, connections to investors, customers, and really the more you can do that in a customized way, the more you can do direct introductions, warm introductions, the more successful it's going to be. And I would say a challenge with accelerators is, which is a priority for Foresight and everyone else in the ecosystem, the Canadian government, is how do we build an inclusive entrepreneurship movement in Canada? And in our case specifically, how do we build an inclusive clean tech and climate entrepreneurship movement? And from having run now many different accelerator programs, education, like entrepreneurship education 101 programs and accelerator programs, the one really big gap, and there are many because we're really talking about systemic barriers, but one of the main gaps is the friends and family round. So if you are an entrepreneur and you're pursuing an idea and you have friends and family who can invest in your business, and even if it's not an investment, but it's, you can live at your parents' house, or, if everything goes sideways, you can always rely on your parents to put a roof over your head. That's great. I mean, we should all, that's a great thing for parents to provide. But for those who don't have that, it's a huge disadvantage. So I've seen extremely promising entrepreneurs who have extremely promising ideas, but they're working a full-time job, sometimes even two. They may have people that rely on them. It's just going to be much harder for those really high potential entrepreneurs to pursue their idea compared to those who don't have those requirements on them and who have a privilege that can kind of help them go through the entrepreneurship journey. So I think if we can do as a society, as an ecosystem alongside government, find ways to actually provide upfront capital, like a basic income for entrepreneurs who show a lot of promise, but who don't have the financial possibility and safety nets to pursue entrepreneurship, to be able to provide that safety net for them, I think we're going to go a long way in building a more inclusive entrepreneurship and innovation movement, and all benefit as a result.
Absolutely. And sometimes the benefits take a little bit to be realized, right? A company that's gone through some of our earlier stage programming, is now 4 or 5 years later just doing that $250 million raise, has a team of 100, highly paid, highly qualified staff. And it takes time, especially when, whether we like it or not, we have a bit of an adoption problem globally within Canada in terms of really taking the reins and getting industry and communities to adopt these technologies and solutions. So I want to sort of get your take on some of this. Where does Canada stand in terms of our deployment and adoption of these solutions that these incredible entrepreneurs, researchers, and founders, both within corporate and independently, are building?
So the strengths of Canada, I think, pertain also to my previous answer around diversity. The diversity of our country really is a strength in our innovation and inability to do innovation and entrepreneurship. So I credit part of that to the reason that we have so many Canadian companies on the global Cleantech 100. Actually, more companies, Canadian companies, on the global Cleantech 100 than any other country in the world except the US. So there's a lot for us to be proud of. Cleantech in Canada contributes hundreds of thousands of jobs, tens of billions of dollars to Canada's GDP, where we punch above our weight in many regards in clean tech. And yourself, myself, anyone who's worked as a kind of intermediary with entrepreneurs, running accelerators, incubators, et cetera, it's very clear we do not lack ambition, we do not lack talent, we do not lack the innovation and invention that we see is just incredible. But at the same time, what we're seeing is some pretty big challenges for Canadian clean tech. Some of those, and I'm sure this is not an exhaustive list, but off the top of my head, you have domestic adoption is lagging. And that is a huge challenge. If you can't get your big customers, your demonstration customers here, you're going to have a hard time doing so abroad, and you're going to leave the country. So that's a massive challenge. We're weak on manufacturing. We have had a net trade deficit in clean tech for many years, and most of our exports in clean tech go to the USA. So there's not a lot of diversification there. And of course, with the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, there is a lot of incentives for clean tech companies in the US to build and scale there. And of course, the monetary environment and pullback in venture capital means that accessing capital is a really big challenge for many clean tech companies at the moment. But we've seen so many incredible companies in Canada with incredible products struggle and get pulled abroad. And really what we want to see is anchor companies here exporting products abroad, scaling abroad, but we don't want to lose our innovators, and we don't want to see some of our best innovations fail to get to market.
So within the last 30 days, a significant announcement has come out that EarthTech is going to be evolving into a new program called EarthTech 2050. Continues to be this incredible collaboration between SI and Foresight. What is different and unique about this program that's going to give ventures that next push that they need?
So EarthTech 2050 is really the result of this partnership, looking at all of our programs, our staff team, our expertise, Foresight's BHAG, and thinking, what can we do with this program? This program has run for 3 years. It's been very successful. It has a very high net promoter score. There's nothing fundamentally broken about this program. But when we look at the other offerings by Foresight, by the entire ecosystem, we had this opportunity to be like, how do we take this program to the next level? What's a gap that's maybe missing? And so for us as a team, including everyone at Foresight and the team at Social Innovation Canada, we really said, why don't we put a really high threshold for impact and make this a smaller cohort? So we've gone from 20 potential ventures to 10, work with them longer. So we've gone from 6 months to 9 months, and put a high impact threshold to really assess who has the most impact potential and who's made progress. They've already been in accelerators. We have all this criteria to make sure that they're a good fit. And if they're not a great fit yet, then we have all these other programs that are part of our acceleration ramp where these entrepreneurs can go. So by focusing on those with the highest impact potential, we can put more resources behind them. So this threshold for this program is 0.5 gigaton of CO2 equivalent emissions or reductions by 2050. And that's a lot. Those are a lot of emissions. We really have to get going now with those kinds of breakthrough technologies and helping them scale rapidly to have a chance of getting to 0.5 gigaton each by 2050. And so the way we're going to do that is we're in recruitment right now. We will have this incredible cohort. So far, I've been blown away by all of the submissions and the pitches. So I know that we're going to have a really strong cohort. And this cohort will be with ventures that are potentially at quite different stages. And so that's where that customization piece really comes in. So with this accelerator, we're going to use entire teams of handpicked advisors and experts to work with the venture. And the first step is really doing a deep dive with the entrepreneur. So we have a whole system that we've developed, a methodology to help facilitate this process between the venture, ourselves, and this group of experts to really understand everything there is to know about this business, about this team, about their technology, about the market, about the policy environment, et cetera, and then really figure out where they need help. So what are their objectives, their key results? What do they need to do to achieve them? And how do we actually help them achieve those key results and objectives? And so we basically are building a custom accelerator for every single venture in this cohort. And all of it is tracked and then built out across a timeline, and then any changes are recorded. So at the end of the program, you'll be able to look back as an entrepreneur in this program and see everything that you've done, everything that you've achieved over these 9 months, and all the support that you received along the way. And that journey for each of these entrepreneurs is going to look really, really different. So there's definitely still some group elements, some standard activities and events across the program, but really 80% of it, 85% of it is entirely customized to the entrepreneur. So they're going to get a ton of value. I think it's really exciting to really put impact first for an accelerator like this, to make it long, because we know this is oftentimes deep and hard tech, and really get in there with more resources, more experts, and really actually whatever they need. We're here. We have a team, we have experts, we have advisors. Whatever they need, we'll build it, we'll go get it, we'll make the connections for them, where we really become a part of their team, a part of their journey, and doing what we think together, what we decide as a team, with including them, what is best for their success, and actually making it happen. So it's really exciting to be a part of their journeys in that way, to be able to fully customize an accelerator experience for each entrepreneur. And we'd love to potentially create more of these accelerators, putting impact first, highly customized, small cohorts, long duration, and really making sure that we get adoption right, that we have this impact happening in Canada and around the world.
I'm so excited to see how everything comes together with this cohort. I know I've seen some of the applications and the list is amazing. Before we close off, let's leave the audience with, your takeaway. What advice would you give an entrepreneur in 2023 going into 2024 who is in the climate space and considering taking part in an accelerator program?
So if you're considering taking part in an accelerator program, it's a big decision. And I've seen that as there's more accelerators in ecosystems, entrepreneurs have gotten quite smart about selecting accelerators. So what you want to do, first of all, is do not go into an accelerator just for the profile. So you can say that you're part of such and such accelerator. That is not a good use of anyone's time or resources. And if the accelerator is really invested in impact, they're going to ask you to leave. So do not join an accelerator just so you can put a badge on your website. That's not what they're meant for. It's not an awards category, or it's not a prize. It's a program, and it's really designed to do some heavy lifting alongside you. Then you want to do your homework. There are a lot of accelerators out there. So you really want to figure out, you've got a lot of opportunities. If you've got a promising team, promising technology, good business model, there are a lot of accelerators that will be out there willing to work with you. And it's not at all uncommon to be in several programs. Sometimes they overlap. Certainly in a year, 2 years, entrepreneurs will have been through several programs. But you want to do your homework. Which one is really a good fit for you? What are their requirements? What are you going to have to do when you're in there? How much of your time is it going to take? So you want to talk to other entrepreneurs, similar startups that have been in the program. You want to check references. You really want to do some digging to make sure that this is a program that is right for you and is going to really help you succeed. And then once you're in an accelerator, you can only get as much as you put in. There's a well-designed and resourced accelerator will have a lot to offer. They're going to be very responsive to your needs. So you really have to invest that time in this accelerator, in getting to know the people, what they can offer, and being open and communicating to get the best out of it. And on the communication front, that's probably my last point, is just you really have to have open communication. 99% of the people who are running an accelerator, building accelerators, are there to see you succeed. So that open communication throughout the accelerator, if there's something that's not going well, if there's something that you need help with, if there's something you feel could be done better, everyone's going to win if that's communicated and there's open conversation.
I am so excited to see what's in store for the new EarthTech 2050 cohort and the rest of Foresight's alumni ventures as they continue to make headlines and contribute to the fight against climate change. Taking part in an accelerator program can change the trajectory of a venture. Our coaching, mentorship, and networking opportunities can make a world of difference for early stage ventures. Creating a Cleantech venture is a roller coaster of uncertainty, and having a team of supportive people around you can help you clarify your business goals, connect with customers or partners, and achieve market readiness sooner. If you're curious to know if we can make a difference in your business venture, visit us at foresightcac.com to find out how. Our second guest today is joining us from Cycle Momentum, a Montreal-based cleantech startup accelerator founded in 2014. Patrick Gagné is the CEO of Cycle Momentum and a board member at Startup Montreal, as well as Zone AgTech. Patrick brings 25 years of experience in entrepreneurship and technology to his position as CEO and has a thorough understanding of what businesses need to succeed. He has held positions with the Laval Smart Mobility Incubator and Accelerator, Startup Genome, and the InnoCité Montreal Accelerator. Cycle Momentum offers entrepreneurs a specialized and personalized program of training workshops, networking sessions, and experienced mentors to help them develop and commercialize clean technologies and build globally competitive companies. Here's more from Patrick on his background, why accelerators are so important for Canadian cleantech ventures, and his overall passion for sustainability.
I've been in tech for 25 years, mainly digital technologies, as an entrepreneur, and working in small startups in the area, based mainly out of Montreal. And at some point, I realized I'd like to do more than tech for tech, and wanted to see how we can use tech for the greater good. And in 2015, I co-founded a company called Teo Taxi, which was the first electric taxi fleet in Canada. And got ramped it up to 400 cars, managed that company to until 2018, and decided to, after that, devote myself to developing the startup ecosystem in Quebec, based out of Montreal. Co-founded Startup Montreal, which is a startup support organization and an advocacy agency, if you will, for the startup ecosystem in Quebec. And more recently, I joined forces with Cycle Capital to lead Cycle Momentum, which is a startup accelerator in climate tech. So I've been in the climate scene since 2014 when I co-founded Teo Taxi, but more recently as an investor and also as a leader in a not-for-profit startup support organization called Cycle Momentum.
I'm sure some of your experiences, both as a startup CEO and founder, and as part of an ecosystem, you start to see some of the gaps that exist and how organizations like yours can fill them.
Yeah, and the gaps are many, and I think they're similar as well in BC and other provinces. In Canada, is one of the main gaps is pipeline development. So the sheer volume of startups that are created on a yearly basis to address climate issues, I think we're facing that in Canada as a whole, and specifically in Quebec. We're realizing that the pipeline is falling short, so we are working on that. The other is also funding, VC funding for early stage startups in climate tech. So the pre-seed stage, namely check sizes from 150K to 500K. For companies that are trying to bridge the gap between prototype and pilot project with clients, that's a gap we've also identified. So there's a bit of a trough there, walk through the desert for some of the clean tech entrepreneurs that are at that stage. That's another gap. And the other gap you and I identified through our collaboration, Jeanette, was scale-ups, and how we help climate tech scale-ups in Canada export and drive growth at an international level. And that's something we've been working on, you and I, for the last 2 years. So, and to sum it up, those are the three gaps that we've identified on our end.
Absolutely. Our findings parallel the same. Let's dig into Cycle Momentum specifically. What is Cycle Momentum and what is it exactly that you do?
So we're a startups accelerator. And typically, as an accelerator, we support startups that are TRL 6 to 9, right? When you have a product, you're starting to sell. So we help startups de-risk commercially their product technology, and oftentimes, what we've seen is that from the 110 plus alumni, we have 50% of them are scientific entrepreneurs. And a lot of these folks, their profile is not geared towards business development. So that's one thing that we focus on in our acceleration programs is de-risking commercially their project. So we have two types of programs. We have programs that are typically aimed at making these startups VC fundable through our acceleration programs. And we also have innovation or open innovation programs with industrial players. The two have different objectives. The first, acceleration programs, the objective is to put these startups in front of investors. And the second, innovation programs with industrial, is to put, obviously, these startups in front of potential clients, potential buyers of their solutions. So there are two different outputs, two different types of programs, and two different types of funding as well. So our acceleration programs are funded by mainly the government of Quebec, and our open innovation programs are funded by industrial partners, such as Cascades in Quebec. We're also working at an international level with players such as Suzano Ventures and L'Oreal for our innovation programs. We're working on other types of programs that we're going to be announcing soon in fall. So stay tuned. Very exciting that projects that we've been developing in the last year. They're going to be unveiled in September.
When you think about Cycle Momentum and some of the other groups across the country, I know you have some pretty interesting connections. You started to touch on some of those, but what sets you apart from other clean tech accelerators in Canada? Although clean tech only accelerators are a little few and far between. I know our two are one. So we'll broaden the scope a little. What generally from what other
accelerators? Because between Foresight and Cycle Momentum, there are other accelerators out there, but very few actually that are devoted to clean tech. But really, we're tied to Cycle Capital, so we're close to the investor portion of the startup ecosystem in climate tech. So we have very close ties with the investment community, not only in Quebec but in Canada and abroad. we built this club, if you will, this investment club called the Circle of Partner Funds. 2.5 years ago, we launched that, and today we're at 50 members in that club that gather around our events, our end of cohort events for our programs, and get to have access to our deal flow, if you will, or our alumni. And we're currently at 30 alumni per year right now that this investment group is exposed to. So we're growing that investor club, if you will, the Circle of Partner Funds. We're growing it quarter by quarter. So, by year end next year, we might be at 70 and eventually, at 100 over the next 2 years. So that's one element that would be distinctive, is that we're really focused on investment and creating investment opportunities with our investment community, or a club, if you will, that we built. So that's one strong differentiator, is that we're closely tied to Cycle Capital and the investment community. The other is that we're very focused on entrepreneurships and entrepreneurs. Strongly believe, and it's at our core belief, that the best training that we provide can only be provided, or should be provided, by other entrepreneurs, so serial entrepreneurs. So we're becoming this sort of a center of gravity for entrepreneurs locally here in Quebec, but also some are from outside of Quebec, in the US, for instance, that come and mentor our startups in our programs. And we think that raises the bar in terms of quality of support for our startups. And lastly, a third element I would say is that we're really focused on bringing industry partners in the mix. So by developing these open innovation programs that last 9 to 12 months, we go in depth in terms of way beyond matchmaking, but really creating commercial ties between startups and industry players that can be flagship clients for these companies, and can literally change their lives as entrepreneurs. So that's one thing that we're focusing on a lot we'll want to grow that over the next 3 to 5 years.
It makes sense. I mean, we can provide so many solutions, whether it's technologies, services, and business models to the market. But if adoption isn't there, if those stakeholders that help finance the scale up or help with the adoption of these solutions doesn't take place in the acceleration ramp, then I do think that we are not doing as best as we can.
Yeah, and we're doing them a big service to these startups if we're introducing them to potential clients, because that really raises the bar in terms of their valuations over time, right? If you sign a client like L'Oreal in your books as a flagship client, well, definitely that has a strong impact on your potential valuation when it comes to time to raise the next round. So yeah, definitely agree with you on that, Jeanette.
So let's dig into why accelerators exist. I know that there's been some back and forth. I think some are high performing and some are there to just exist. And I'm obviously bullish on the former. I think that there's some great ones doing great work.
Of course. Of course. So why is it so important? I think that it takes a village to raise startups, and especially in climate tech, because you're talking about companies that have potentially longer R&D cycles, longer biz dev cycles as well, sales cycles. So not only do you need to rally patient capital that knows how to invest in complex technologies. It's one thing investing in a SaaS model or in a mobile app in a digital sector, digital technology sectors. It's a totally different ballgame investing in a company that's extracting advanced materials, or transforming chemically some materials and integrating that into hardware, sensors, into a technology stack that's super complex. I think it's critical that we bring to the table as accelerators, we bring the right investors at the table, the right industry partners to become clients, and create demand for these products. Money isn't the only piece of the puzzle. There has to be support in terms of bringing these startups to become commercially viable. So for me, accelerators in the climate tech space are an absolute critical component of the development of our ecosystem nationally and locally.
When I think about some other groups that come to mind that are doing good work in accelerating the transition, policy does come into play. How do you see the activity or function of advocating and policy changes embedded or separate or in alignment with what we're seeing at the accelerator level?
I think it's complementary, and you and I have had that chat many times in the past. Government can be a key partner, and I haven't touched on that yet, so thank you for that question. Government is as far as I can see, apart from funding through grants, can also become a potential first buyer of solutions, and that's where I think advocacy has to play a role, is in rallying industry partners and bringing them at the table to engage with startups, either through strong regulation or through incentives. I think both should work hand in hand, but definitely government being potential first time buyer from these startups could be a critical a role for developing the ecosystem, and that's something that we've been definitely advocating here for in Quebec, and I think you are as well on your end, Jeanette.
I know. I think, it's really hard to go to certain funders and say, look, we need support for ecosystem building, right? It's not, it takes time to track the impacts and think about the type of data that you can collect through those types of activities. But what we do know is that when all of us who are so passionate about this space have, taken a team that's funded of 5 people, for example, and off the side of our desk, had to basically try to manage and mobilize the ecosystem to engage, we've seen that the benefits are exponential when it comes to increasing the pace that these ventures scale, increasing the number of industry partners that engage, making sure academia is at the table and understanding sort of what these needs are, making sure funders, like that's all ecosystem building. And I know, like you, trying to figure out what is the right angle, whether it's a cluster strategy, whether it's a regional or sectoral initiative, how do we get the right players at the table?
Well, academia is a complex one, and we're working right now on potential projects in terms of venture building with academia for fall. That's one of the new projects that we're working on in collaboration with L'Esplanade and 2 Degrés is really to work on accelerating the pace of conversion from lab to market, based on the assumption that there is a lot of potential research that has that has a potential impact on reducing GHG emissions. So we're working on the assumption that hasn't been leveraged enough in Quebec, and that we'll be able to accelerate that pace. And we're going to start working with 2-3 universities in fall in a pilot project to accelerate that. So that's also an area that I think is worth exploring to accelerate the pace of the development of our ecosystem, is working upstream with universities and converting, accelerating that conversion through a gating process. And I could go on for an hour just on the venture building opportunity. Strongly believe that that's an avenue that we need to really lean heavily on, and there are some partners that are starting to do it here locally, and some have done in the past. And different models exist in terms of venture building. Some work with IP IP assets, other work with internal teams that develop products with with a product engineering team internally. So there are different models that exist out there, but if you look at the university pool of research, there's a huge potential asset there that hasn't been exploited yet, as far as we're concerned in Quebec.
We've talked about what accelerators can do and do well, but there are some challenges. Do you have a couple that come to mind when you think about your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month activities?
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, you and I have spoken about that as well for a long time, is private funding. I think the challenge that we face as accelerators, we're all, mainly not-for-profits. Some accelerators have a different model. They're tied to venture VC firms and have a different model to fund their operations. But in general, it's private funding. It comes down to identifying sources of private funding to match government funding, and I find that has been a challenge in general in the ecosystem. We've tackled that by setting up a practice of open innovation and getting interested third parties, large industry players at the table to lean in for that sort of project and have been able to show value out of those programs. But yeah, I think private funding with accelerators has been a challenge. And also, I think related specifically to climate tech, I think the talent pool around the table has to be, in terms of mentorship, has to be really tightened up as much as possible. And our ability to get the best mentors out there, so AKA entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs that have background in industry, in manufacturing, in robotics, and in high tech sectors could bring a very, very high value creation in our program. So I think also that has been a challenge, and I think is a crucial one if we want to be able to provide value to startups who have to make a choice. If they're going to sign on to one of our programs, and some of these entrepreneurs are not newbies, new kids around the block. They've potentially had other businesses in the past, so these are seasoned entrepreneurs. They don't need to go through a business model canvas exercise with post-its in a boardroom with other entrepreneurs. It's much deeper. Their experience is much more advanced in terms of business acumen. They have business development experience. So I think that the quality of the content that needs to be injected in our programs has to be in line with their level of maturity as entrepreneurs.
All right, 2 more quick questions. For you personally, why is accelerating Canadian clean tech such an important goal?
Well, obviously, I'm in this because I believe that innovation can definitely change the world / save the world. So I'm a strong proponent of accelerating innovation and having an impact on GHG emissions. I'm an optimistic and a pragmatist, so that's why I'm there. I think that by getting as many startups out there, scaling, addressing real problems with solutions that have a potential impact on reducing dramatically GHG emissions over the next 5-10 years is critical. So I'm in there for mainly that reason, and it's a very gratifying experience so far. I mean, I meet entrepreneurs every day that have the ambition of changing the world and saving, or being part of the solution over the next 5 to 10 years. It's super motivating.
I couldn't agree more. We have a very vibrant Slack channel at Foresight, and it's often pictures of the fires and the smokes and the this and the that, and it's relentless, and we need to work together. Yep. Before we go away, we do have some entrepreneurs listening to the podcast. If you were to give them one piece of advice on how they can maximize their engagement with an accelerator, what would it be?
Creating a valuable experience with the mentor or mentors you are assigned with, I think is a key part of the experience, because you have the chance as an entrepreneur to meet another entrepreneur that has been matched with you. And I think building that relationship over time, even beyond the acceleration program, can be invaluable. We see some entrepreneurs in our programs that create strong ties with their mentor beyond our programs, and I think that's a very, very encouraging sign. So I think I would encourage you as an entrepreneur to lean into that relationship and really build something valuable over time.
Canadian accelerators are a vital part of the clean tech ecosystem and the overall economic system, if you ask me. And I am so proud of the work that we do. Through our efforts and the efforts of people like Barnabe and Patrick, Canadian clean tech innovations are making a difference here in Canada and around the world. Canada can become a leader and sustain that position in clean tech innovation and be a go-to destination for everything clean tech for investors and industry partners around the world. But we need to work together and work with urgency. It's exciting to see the growth and impact that we have been able to accomplish in the first 10 years that Foresight has been enabling clean tech innovation in Canada. We have grown an incredible, passionate team supporting hundreds of inspiring clean tech innovators, developed powerful partnerships with inspiring industry leaders, investors, academia, and governments domestically and globally, and established a collaborative clean tech community across Canada. While we have accomplished some incredible milestones, this fight is far from over. Across the country and around the world, we are seeing increasingly catastrophic effects brought on by our rapidly changing environment. From devastating floods to unprecedented wildfires and record-breaking heat waves, to food and fresh water shortages, the climate crisis is increasingly showing its face everywhere. So as we celebrate all that we have accomplished in our first 10 years, we must acknowledge the immense amount of work that still lies before us on the path to net zero. Talking to leaders like our guest today, it's reassuring to know that passionate individuals like these are working hard to elevate clean tech everywhere. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Cleantech Forward podcast wherever you listen and to share this episode with friends and colleagues. Join us next month when we'll be back discussing the acceleration of clean tech with some of Canada's most inspiring clean tech innovators. I will see you there.
To learn more about Foresight's programs, events, and more, visit us at foresightcac.com or follow us on social at ForesightCAC.